I find that atheists and those who believe in the divine are equally open to this work because the way that I word the exercises is both scientific and spiritual.
Right.
So I'll talk about a scientific basis in terms of hypnotherapy, which is a part of psychology, and I will also relate it to the divine. I let my students know that it doesn't matter whether past lives and future lives are real or not. It doesn't matter if you believe God is real or not. I'm not here to prove one way or the other.
Okay.
So there's a question of whether or not the afterlife is real, and it's really not the job of the psychic or intuitive to impose a belief system on their client. It's up to the client to have their own belief system and also to make their own decisions in life. The role of the intuitive is simply to present information as it's being shown to them, and then to let go of the results and to let go of controlling their client's life. To respect the client enough to know that they can be trusted to make their own decisions. They've gotten this far and they're still here, so they'll probably continue to be okay.
Like that.
If they hadn't gotten that far, they wouldn't have shown up to the session.
So, that's funny.
I think that when looking for a theater group to work with, you're interviewing them, they're not just interviewing you.
Right.
So it's okay to ask what their goal is with their theatrical works to find out if it really is a good fit for you, because just like with relationships, it's like trying to match up with the best compatibility between people. It's not really about a hierarchy as much. And of course, do some research, maybe ask some people who have worked with this theater company for some years how they feel about it, find out about what the beliefs are of the directors who work there in terms of who do they follow. You can ask them, who are some of your favorite directors throughout time, and through that possibly gauge what their style might be. I would also recommend seeing the shows there before joining the company. And if, as an actor, you feel stuck, you don't think you're channeling, you don't think that you're feeling very spiritual about your performance, one thing you can do is to try to write in the voice of your character, but do it without looking at the page, or do it with your non-dominant hand, or do it blindfolded. Do it in cursive, and that way you'll be connecting more with the right side of your brain, which is a way to connect more deeply with collective creativity.
That's cool.
And I just coined that phrase, collective creativity. That's not a real phrase. I think I just merged a couple of phrases, but that's fine.
You know, what do you think the role of theater has in American society now, especially regarding the spiritual? I mean, do you think a lot of people believe, and I know there's a kind of a poverty, a lack belief in theater, which can be really hard to overcome, kind of a collective belief. Do you, and people often say that theater is not relevant. Do you believe that to be the case? Do you see that at all?
I believe that theater is just as relevant as it ever was, and in terms of American society and theater today, theater is very much needed for us to question the systems that we have, and also to question our personal choices in life. We're going through a huge worldwide transformation right now, and one of those transformations is taking place in an economic form. There can be a poverty consciousness. I think you mentioned you think there's a poverty consciousness in theater.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, theater tends to be an art form that doesn't usually bring in a lot of profit, and many people do theater without receiving monetary gain. They do it just for the love of it, which to me proves that it's a spiritual act. I believe that one way to get beyond poverty consciousness is to be willing to take secondary work that supports your work in theater, and through that secondary work to possibly funnel a little bit of it into creating your own productions that have some kind of meaning that could contribute to society. And in your secondary work, to possibly find some way to make that meaningful to yourself, if it's because it's service-oriented or simply because you're using it to support theater and your spiritual beliefs, then it can definitely be something that's worthwhile. There also is self-hypnosis for improving poverty consciousness. And it's something where there's a different way of thinking about money that can shift and change the beliefs of our subconscious mind. So from an early age, we're going to have certain beliefs about finances, positive and negative, that are in our subconscious mind. And it's very hard to change those unless you do hypnosis or self-hypnosis. And while you're in that state of mind, being given suggestions or giving suggestions to yourself to change the negatives into positive. The reason this is done while you're in a state of hypnosis rather than when you're in a conscious state is because our critical mind gets in the way of us having new beliefs. So you could say throughout the day, I'm wealthy, I'm bringing in lots of money, but your critical mind will reject that if it's not part of your subconscious belief system. However, when you're relaxed and go into a state of hypnosis, those suggestions from your conscious mind of I'm wealthy, I have money coming in now, go directly into your subconscious mind, and you'll find yourself taking different actions in your financial life and possibly getting different results. It's not a guarantee, but it is a possibility, and I have seen people get different opportunities by doing that hypnosis work, which, by the way, the hypnosis work is always a great way to begin any spiritual performance or rehearsal.
Cool. You know, a lot of theater people are empathic. They may be intuitive. Empath is they can walk into a room and know what everyone's feeling. Do you have any advice for people like that have that going on? Because I noticed in my own work, a lot of people are overwhelmed. And I was always attracting a lot of artists and writers. And do you have any advice for that other than taking your class? Because I know that's a given. That is a given, and we will mention that. I swear. I mean, I definitely, because I think learning a technique to deal with that is maybe important for some people, because they may try to blank out with drugs, alcohol, food, whatever, to deal with that. Do you have any advice for that? And we will talk about your classes. Definitely. I'm not dissing your classes.
No worries.
Okay.
So I believe that a truly great actor has empathy. And if there's only one thing that I ever would have taught my students about acting, it's to have empathy, to develop compassion in your everyday life. And if you can see through someone else's eyes and imagine walking in their shoes, then you're well on your way to becoming an even better performer. I think that's part of the point of acting. So for many actors in theater, they probably have a heightened sense of empathy and sensitivity. There are a few things that a person can do to deal with having boundaries with that. And one of the first that I recommend to my students is having boundaries in everyday relationships. By practicing boundaries in your physical life, then it's easier to have boundaries emotionally on stage. Another thing that someone can do, which I would recommend to mediums, intuitives, and actors, is to imagine that you have a coat of armor on before going on stage. If you feel like you're too affected by the emotions of the actors around you. However, I think it's good to be open in a performance to receiving emotions. So I usually don't recommend the armor before a performance, but I think it's most beneficial after a performance. When you're meeting up with the audience, when people are asking you questions about your performance, if you're feeling emotionally overwhelmed on a day-to-day basis, then having that armor on can be helpful. Another thing that might be helpful is imagining a white light around you, which is something I'm sure you've read about before. And by doing that, you're giving yourself self-hypnosis that's a reminder to have healthy boundaries with other people. So it can be helpful in day-to-day life and in acting performances.